The terror of the deep SRS location, Aqualis Prime, Ocean World in the Kepler 442 system year, 2387. The Galactic Council had many names for it. The Velarath Senate called it Vrakthul, the one that cannot be killed. The Merindian Collective referred to it simply as the Silence, because whenever it appeared, every living creature went silent in instinctive primal fear. The ancient Zorathian texts, carved on obsidian tablets over 40,000 years ago, called it the god below the water and warned that no civilization should ever attempt to hunt it, challenge it, or even look at it directly. Its scientific designation in the Galactic Registry was Leviathan Abyssicus Primordius, but every species in the known galaxy simply called it the Aquatic Deathbeast. And no one, in 40,000 years of recorded galactic history, had ever killed one. Commander Zethra of the Velarath diplomatic fleet stood at the viewport of the GCS Horizon's edge and stared down at the swirling ocean world of Aqualis Prime. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful, a brilliant blue marble wrapped in silver clouds, its vast oceans covering 92% of its surface. Beautiful even. But Zethra knew better. She had studied this world for 15 years. She had watched 37 expeditions attempt to establish a research colony on its surface. All 37 had failed. The reason was simple: the Leviathan Abyssicus Primordius. The creatures averaged 400 meters in length. Their skin was composed of a bioceramic compound harder than most known metals. Their nervous systems were distributed, meaning they had no single brain to target, no central kill point. They possessed an electromagnetic sense organ that allowed them to detect the electrical impulses of technology up to 50 kilometers away. They were fast, capable of reaching speeds of 300 kilometers per hour underwater. And they were intelligent. Not sapient, not in the way most species defined it, but intelligent enough to hunt cooperatively, intelligent enough to remember enemies, intelligent enough to learn. Every civilization that had attempted to colonize Aqualis Prime had been driven off within 6 months. The Merindians had tried 3 times. The Zorathians had attempted to use orbital bombardment to clear shallow coastal zones. The creatures had simply dived deep and returned the moment the bombardment stopped. The Velarath themselves had sent a military fleet equipped with the finest sonic disruption technology in the galaxy. The creatures had adapted to the sonic frequency within 2 weeks. Now the Galactic Council faced a new problem. Aqualis Prime sat at the junction of 3 critical hyperspace lanes. The mineral deposits in its ocean floor, accessible only through sustained surface operations, were essential for the next generation of faster-than-light drive technology. The planet needed to be colonized. The scientific community needed access. But the Deathbeast remained. "Council is growing impatient," said Navigator Preth, a young Velarath with silver-banded antennae who had never seen a Deathbeast in person. "We have been in orbit for 3 weeks now. They are asking if we should consider the human application." Zethra turned from the viewport. "The humans," she repeated, her mandibles clicking in what her species used to express deep skepticism. "The Council is actually considering it. They submitted their proposal 14 months ago," Preth said carefully. "Every other option has been exhausted. The Council says the humans have a different approach." Zethra had read the human proposal. She had read it 3 times in fact because she had been convinced the translation was faulty. Surely something had been lost in the conversion from Standard Galactic to the human dialect. Surely the document didn't actually say what she thought it said. She pulled up the document on her datapad and read the key line again. "We propose to neutralize the Leviathan Abyssicus Primordius threat through culinary domestication and controlled harvest." Culinary domestication. They wanted to eat them. Zethra set down the datapad slowly. Outside, through the viewport, the blue oceans of Aqualis Prime churned silently, hiding their terrible secrets beneath kilometers of dark water. Somewhere down there, creatures that had resisted every weapon, every technology, every military force the galaxy had assembled for 40,000 years were going about their ancient, lethal business. And the humans thought they could turn them into food. The Council's emergency transmission arrived at 0300 hours. The vote had been taken. The application had been approved. The UES Persistence, a human vessel out of the Sol Colonization Authority, was already en route to Aqualis Prime, scheduled to arrive in 11 days. The Council had added one formal note to the approval document. All parties acknowledge that the probability of mission success is assessed at less than 3%. The Galactic Council accepts no liability for any personnel losses incurred during this operation. Zethra read the note, then looked back out at the blue planet. Less than 3%. She wondered, not for the first time, if humans truly understood what they were walking into. She had heard stories, of course. Every species in the galaxy had heard stories about humans by now. Their strange biology. Their inexplicable persistence. Their almost pathological inability to recognize when something was simply beyond their capability. She had always assumed those stories were exaggerated. She was about to find out. The UES Persistence arrived on schedule, a vessel unlike anything in the Velarath fleet. It was broad and utilitarian, built less for elegance than for function, its hull scarred with the marks of deep-sea operations on a dozen colony worlds. It was, Zethra noted, significantly smaller than she expected for a mission of this scale. And yet it trailed behind it an enormous floating platform, a mobile processing and research station, bristling with equipment she didn't recognize. The human commander who hailed her was a woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez. She had dark eyes, sun-weathered skin, and the specific kind of calm that came not from inexperience but from having survived too many situations that should have killed her. "Commander Zethra," she said pleasantly. "Thank you for the orbital data your team collected. The thermal mapping is going to save us a lot of time." "Dr. Vasquez," Zethra replied carefully, "I have reviewed your proposal in detail. I want to ensure you understand the nature of the organisms you are proposing to harvest. The Leviathan Abyssicus primordius is not like the deep-sea fauna of your home world. These creatures have defeated military fleets. They have adapted to sonic weaponry, yes," Vasquez said, nodding. "We read the after-action reports from the Velarath expedition. Very useful, actually. Told us a lot about their sensory processing." Zethra paused. "You read those as useful information?" "Oh, absolutely. The way they adapted to the sonic frequency in 2 weeks? That tells us the creatures have exceptional neuroplasticity. Probably means they'll respond well to conditioning stimuli." She smiled. It was a genuinely warm smile, which made it somehow more unsettling. "Commander, I want to invite you aboard our platform. We'd like to walk you through our methodology. I think you'll find it educational." That word, educational, would turn out to be more accurate than Zethra could have imagined. She accepted the invitation. What she saw on that platform would change her understanding of what humanity truly was. Not a young species stumbling into a galaxy full of ancient dangers, but something older and stranger and more dangerous than anything the Galactic Council had ever catalogued. Because the humans had not come to Aqualis Prime with weapons. They had come with recipes. The methodology. The platform's main laboratory smelled like the ocean. Not the sterile recycled air smell of a Velarath research vessel. Not the chemical tang of a Merindian laboratory. It smelled like salt water and something else. Something Zethra's olfactory system couldn't categorize but that made an ancient, instinctive part of her brain pay attention. "That's the brine extract," said Dr. Marcus Okafor cheerfully, not looking up from the spectral analyzer he was calibrating. He was a tall human with close-cropped gray hair and the focused energy of someone who had spent 40 years doing exactly what he loved. "We synthesized it from the ocean chemistry data. Needed to make sure our equipment was calibrated to local conditions before we go down." Zethra looked around the laboratory. She had expected weapons research, targeting systems, military-grade incapacitation technology. Instead she saw chemical analysis stations, what appeared to be an enormous industrial kitchen, a behavioral conditioning array that looked like nothing so much as a training facility, and an entire wall covered in what humans called a whiteboard, covered in equations, diagrams, and what appeared to be annotated photographs of the Leviathan Abyssicus primordius with arrows pointing to various anatomical sections labeled with words like primary flavor compounds and estimated yield per specimen and texture profile, comparable to giant squid but with higher protein density. Navigator Preth, who had accompanied Zethra, made a sound that was the Velarath equivalent of deeply confused silence. "You are," Zethra said slowly, analyzing the creature's taste. "Flavor chemistry, yes," said Dr. Vasquez, who had appeared at Zethra's shoulder. "It's the foundation of the entire methodology. You can't develop a sustainable harvest protocol without first understanding the product." She said the word product with genuine warmth, the way a craftsperson might speak about their art. "Humans have been doing this for tens of thousands of years. Every apex predator on our home world, every creature that our ancestors feared, that killed us, that we thought was beyond our ability to control, eventually ended up on a menu. That is," Preth said carefully, "a remarkable statement. It's true though." Vasquez pulled up a holographic timeline on the central display. "Blue whale, largest animal on our planet, capable of producing enough force with its tail to destroy a vessel. We hunted it to near extinction and developed whale-watching tourism. Great white shark, apex marine predator, perfect biological killing machine, essentially unchanged for 400 million years. We turned it into shark fin soup and sport fishing. Saltwater crocodile, an animal that has killed humans throughout our entire history. We turned it into leather goods and tourist experiences. She paused. There's a pattern there. The pattern being, Zethra said, that you kill and consume everything. The pattern being, Vasquez corrected gently, that humans don't see apex predators as threats. We see them as resources. And sometimes, when we're being careful, which we learn to be after making some serious mistakes, we see them as sustainable resources worth protecting. She gestured at the whiteboard. The goal here isn't extermination. It's integration. We want the Leviathan Abyssicus primordius to become economically valuable to the galactic community. A species that generates revenue doesn't get extinct. It gets managed. Zethra stared at the whiteboard for a long moment. The equations were complex. She could read the mathematics, and what she was reading was a comprehensive ecological management model. Population dynamics. Breeding cycle analysis. Sustainable yield calculations. And yes, interspersed with all of it, detailed culinary chemistry. The flavor compounds, she said. Why do those matter to the management model? Dr. Okafor looked up from his analyzer with genuine enthusiasm. Because the market drives the management. If we establish that the Leviathan's tissue has exceptional nutritional and flavor properties, which our preliminary analysis from the Council's biological samples strongly suggests, then we create demand. Demand creates economic incentive. Economic incentive creates sustainable harvest regulation. Sustainable harvest regulation means the species survives and the colony can coexist with them. He beamed. It's elegant, really? On your world, Preth said slowly, this is how you resolved conflicts with apex predators? Through commercial incentivization. Not always, Vasquez admitted. We also made a lot of mistakes. Hunted things to extinction before we understood what we were doing. Destroyed ecosystems out of fear or greed. It took us a long time to learn. Her voice was honest about this. No defensiveness, just the plain acknowledgement of historical fact. But we learned. And what we learned is that the most powerful tool for coexisting with a dangerous creature is making that creature useful. The next 6 hours were, for Zethra, one of the most intellectually disorienting experiences of her 300-year career. The human team walked her through every aspect of their methodology with the patient enthusiasm of teachers who genuinely loved their subject. The behavioral conditioning specialist, a young woman named Dr. Yuki Tanaka, explained how the team planned to use the creature's own electromagnetic sensitivity against them, broadcasting specific frequency signatures from buoys to gradually establish safe corridors and exclusion zones. We're essentially teaching them that certain areas are not worth investigating, Tanaka said. It takes time. But they're intelligent. The Velarath data showed they can learn. Learning works both ways. The marine chemist, Dr. Rashid Al-Farsi, walked Zethra through the tissue analysis of preserved Leviathan samples the Council had collected from natural deaths over the centuries. His enthusiasm was almost disturbing. The protein structure is extraordinary, he said, pulling up molecular models. Dense, complex amino acid chains unlike anything in our culinary database. The fat marbling is different from anything on Earth, but the distribution pattern suggests it would respond beautifully to low-temperature cooking methods. And the mineral content. He shook his head reverently. Commander, this creature has been filtering the mineral-rich depths of this ocean for millions of years. Its tissue is essentially a repository of every rare compound that makes this planet scientifically valuable. It's not just food. It's medicine. It's materials science. It is, Zethra said, a 40,000-year terror of this planet. Yes, Al-Farsi agreed happily. And in 40 years it's going to be on the menu at the finest restaurants in the galaxy. We're going to make it famous. That night, Zethra sent a transmission to the Galactic Council. Her assessment was 3 sentences long. I have reviewed the human methodology in detail. I do not fully understand it. I believe it will work. First contact. The first dive happened on a Tuesday. Humans, Zethra had learned, tracked their days with a 7-unit cycle called a week, and they had strong feelings about which days were appropriate for which activities. Tuesday, according to Dr. Vasquez, was a good day to start something difficult. Zethra did not fully understand the cultural logic, but she had stopped questioning human cultural logic after the 3rd day on the platform. The dive team consisted of 6 humans and submersible craft that looked, to Zethra's eye, dangerously fragile for the task at hand. They were not military submersibles. They were research vessels, equipped with sensors, sampling equipment, the behavioral conditioning buoys Dr. Tanaka had designed, and what Dr. Okafor had cheerfully described as the most important piece of equipment on the entire mission. A long-range scent dispersal system loaded with synthesized chemical attractants derived from the Leviathan's own prey species. They were going to find the creature. On purpose. Zethra watched from the platform's observation deck as the submersibles slipped beneath the surface. The ocean here was a deep, saturated blue-green, visibility dropping to near zero within 20 meters due to the planet's dense phytoplankton population. Sensor feeds from the submersibles appeared on the platform's main screen. Depth readings, temperature gradients, and the electromagnetic pulse monitor, the instrument that would tell them when a Leviathan was near. It took 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The electromagnetic spike hit every sensor simultaneously. Zethra felt the pulse through the platform's hull, a low, resonant vibration that her biology processed as a warning signal. Every Velarath instinct she possessed screamed at her to move away from the water. On the screen, the submersible cameras showed darkness. Then, movement. Something enormous, resolving out of the black water with the slow, inevitable quality of a continent shifting. The Leviathan was bigger than the sensor data had suggested. It was always bigger in person. 400 meters of bioceramic armor plating, bioluminescent organs pulsing with cold blue light along its flanks, jaw structure wide enough to swallow one of the submersibles entirely without slowing down. It moved with a grace that its mass made impossible, and yet there it was, gliding through the water with the effortless precision of a creature that had never in its evolutionary history encountered anything it needed to be afraid of. It turned toward the nearest submersible. Zethra held her breath. In the submersible, Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the comm feed, calm and focused, electromagnetic signature consistent with threat assessment posture. Activating Phase 1 conditioning array. Pause. Buoys deployed. 12 buoys spread from the submersible in a precise geometric pattern, each one broadcasting the specific electromagnetic frequency Dr. Tanaka's team had identified as the creature's neutral response range. Not threatening, not submissive, but a tone that the behavioral data suggested the creatures associated with their own kind in non-aggressive states. The Leviathan slowed. It was subtle, a slight change in the movement pattern, a reduction in the directional urgency. But Zethra had reviewed enough Leviathan behavioral data to recognize it. The creature was recalibrating, trying to understand what it was sensing. Phase 2, Tanaka said. The scent dispersal system activated. Zethra didn't need to see the chemical clouds to know they were spreading. She could see the Leviathan's response, the great head turning slightly, sensory organs processing the unfamiliar signal. Dr. Okafor's voice joined the feed, attractant dispersal nominal. If the prey scent association holds, we should see a... The Leviathan stopped. For 7 seconds, it was completely motionless. 400 meters of the galaxy's most feared predator, hovering in the water 15 meters from a human submersible, processing information that didn't match its experience base. Then it turned away. Not fleeing. Not retreating. Simply, losing interest. The attractant had triggered an exploratory response. The creature was turning toward the source of the scent signal, moving away from the submersibles toward the dispersal point, following what its nervous system told it was a food source. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the comm, and even across the radio feed Zethra could hear the smile in it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have behavioral engagement. Log it as a successful Phase 1 interaction. Let's bring the boats up and debrief. On the observation deck, Preth turned to Zethra with an expression that combined astonishment with something that might have been admiration. They redirected it, he said. Without weapons. Without violence. They simply gave it something else to think about. Yes, Zethra said. That is either very brilliant or very lucky. With humans, Zethra replied, watching the submersibles rise toward the surface, I have begun to suspect those two things are often the same. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. The human team approached it with the methodical energy of people who had done this kind of work before, not on this world, not with this creature, but in the fundamental practice of understanding a dangerous animal well enough to change its behavior. Every data point was recorded. Every behavioral response was categorized. Dr. Tanaka updated her conditioning models in real time. The good news, she said, projecting her revised timeline on the conference room screen, is that the creature's response to the electromagnetic conditioning stimulus was faster than our baseline model predicted. That suggests higher neuroplasticity than the Velarath data indicated. Faster learning. If that holds, we might be able to establish the first safe corridor zone within 30 days instead of 60. And the attractant? Al-Farsi asked. Also better than projected. The prey scent association triggered a foraging response, which means we can use dispersal patterns to direct movement. Not control, we're not trying to control them. But direct. Tanaka paused. I want to be careful about overstating this. We had one successful interaction. We need to replicate it across multiple individuals, multiple depth profiles, multiple behavioral states. Agreed, Vasquez said. We do this carefully. We do this right. She looked around the table at her team and then at Zethra and Preth, who had been invited to the debriefing as observers. Any questions from our Velarath colleagues? Zethra had many questions. She chose the most important one. How long, she said, before the first harvest? Vasquez considered this. Sustainable harvest requires established behavioral management, population census, reproductive cycle mapping and regulatory framework. Realistically? 18 months before the first controlled harvest. 2 years before we have enough data to set sustainable yield quotas. She paused. But the colony can begin surface operations in safe corridor zones within 90 days. That's the immediate goal, give the Galactic Council access to the planet. 90 days. For access to a world that had resisted colonization for 40,000 years. Zethra sent another transmission to the Galactic Council that evening. This one was longer. The harvest. 2 years later, the planet was unrecognizable. New Meridian Base had grown from a temporary installation of 6 prefabricated modules into a colony of 40,000 residents, Velarath scientists, Merindian mineral engineers, Zorathian cultural historians who had come to study the world their ancestors had feared, and humans, everywhere humans, doing the 1,000 practical things that humans did when they decided somewhere was worth living. The colony's central plaza had a fountain. Zethra stood at its edge and watched the water, actual ocean water pumped up from the bay 3 kilometers away, cascade over polished stones, and thought about the fact that 18 months ago, standing at the edge of this same ocean with nothing between you and the water was a death sentence. Now children played on the beach. The behavioral corridor network covered 60% of the planet's shallow coastal zones. The electromagnetic buoy system, expanded from Dr. Tanaka's initial 12-buoy prototype to a grid of over 4,000 units, had mapped, cataloged, and established predictable movement patterns for 37 individual leviathans. The creatures had not been removed from the ocean. They had not been harmed. They had been, in the human terminology that Zethra had come to understand, managed. And today was the first harvest. The harvest vessel was a purpose-built platform called the Vasquez, named over Dr. Vasquez's vigorous objections, equipped with the specialized equipment that Al-Farsi's team had spent 18 months developing. The harvest protocol was precise. One individual, identified through the population census as an elder specimen past its primary reproductive period. The harvest would be conducted quickly and, as the human team insisted, humanely. A concept that had required significant cultural translation. Zethra watched from the observation gallery as the vessel moved into position. The target Leviathan, designated L07 in the census database, an enormous specimen estimated at 460 meters and approximately 200 years old, was in its mapped patrol zone, following the behavioral pattern that the conditioning array had established over 14 months of careful work. The harvest team had explained the method to Zethra in detail. She had understood it technically. Watching it happen was different from understanding it. It took 11 minutes. When it was over, the harvest vessel's processing platform was activated, and the work that Al-Farsi had been planning for 2 years began in earnest. Zethra descended to the processing level she had asked to observe, and Vasquez had agreed, and what she found was not the grim industrial operation she had expected but something closer to the way the humans described their ancient craft traditions. Purposeful, skilled, respectful in a way she hadn't anticipated. Every part, Al-Farsi said, moving through the space with the focused calm of someone in their element. Nothing is wasted. The bioceramic plating goes to the Zorathian materials scientists. They've been studying it for months, they think it has applications in ship hull technology. The electromagnetic organs go to Dr. Tanaka's team for sensor research. The bioluminescent compounds are already being evaluated by 3 different pharmaceutical companies. He paused at a processing station where 2 of his team members were working carefully with sample sections of the primary tissue. And this. He picked up a small sample, sealed in a preservation container, and held it out to Zethra. She took it. Through the container, the tissue was dark, almost black at the surface with a deep red-brown interior, dense and richly patterned. "We ran the final flavor chemistry 3 days ago," Al-Farsi said. "The compound profile is extraordinary. The amino acid complexity is unlike anything in the human culinary database, or any other species database as far as we can tell. The mineral content from a lifetime filtering this specific ocean is completely unique." He smiled. "Commander, what you're holding is, by any reasonable gastronomic assessment, the rarest and most complex food product in the known galaxy." Zethra looked at the sample. 40,000 years. 40,000 years of fear, of failed expeditions, of worlds left unexplored and hyperspace lanes left unguarded and mineral wealth left untouched. All because of what lived in these oceans. The Vrakthal. The god below the water. Human food. "The Council has received 17 advance purchase inquiries," said Vasquez, appearing at Zethra's shoulder. "Restaurants on 6 different worlds. 3 research institutions interested in the medicinal compounds. The Zarathian Cultural Heritage Foundation wants to fund the long-term population management program in exchange for exclusive access to natural mortality specimens." She paused. "It's going to work, Commander. The economic framework is going to sustain this colony and protect the species simultaneously." "You genuinely care about their survival?" Zethra said. It wasn't a question, she had understood this about the humans for some time. But she wanted to say it aloud. "Of course," Vasquez said simply. "They're magnificent. The galaxy would be poorer without them." She looked out at the ocean. "Our job was never to eliminate the threat. It was to change the relationship. That's always been the human approach." Pause. "Eventually." That evening the human team prepared a meal. It was, Zethra later reported to the Council, the most significant diplomatic event she had witnessed in 300 years of service. Representatives of 8 species sat at a table on the beach of Aqualis Prime, a planet that had been considered uninhabitable for 40 millennia, and ate together. The food was extraordinary. Even Zethra, whose species processed nutrition very differently from humans, could register the complexity of what she was tasting through the chemical sensors in her mandibles. The sun set over the ocean. The bioluminescent patterns of 3 leviathans, moving in their mapped corridors following the conditioning signals, utterly indifferent to the colony on the shore, lit the water in cold blue fire. Fear, Zethra thought, was a perspective. And humans had a very different perspective than anyone else in the galaxy. The galaxy learns. The presentation hall of the Galactic Council held 700 representatives. Every seat was filled. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the central podium and felt, for the first time in her professional life, nervous. She had faced down creatures the size of small mountains. She had dived into oceans that no instrument could fully map. She had spent 18 months on a world that every civilization in the galaxy had agreed was too dangerous to inhabit. 700 aliens watching her with focused attention made her palms sweat. She began. 4 years ago, the Galactic Council approved a human proposal to address the Leviathan Abyssicus primordius problem on Aqualis Prime. The Council's own assessment gave the proposal a 3% chance of success. She paused. "I want to start by saying, the Council was right to be skeptical. What we proposed was genuinely unusual. And if it had been attempted by a less experienced team, or without the extraordinary data support provided by Velarath, Merindian, and Zarathian researchers, it would likely have failed." She clicked to her first slide. The planet Aqualis Prime, the new photography taken from New Meridian Base's observation tower, showing the beach and the ocean and the distant bioluminescent trails of leviathans moving in their corridor zone. The hall was very quiet. What we did was not magic. It was not unique human genius. It was the application of principles that our species developed over tens of thousands of years of coexisting with dangerous animals on our home world. She walked through the methodology, the behavioral conditioning, the ecological management framework, the economic model that aligned commercial interest with species preservation. She was thorough and specific. She wanted every representative in that hall to understand that this was replicable, that this could be taught. New Meridian Colony currently has a population of 63,000, she said. The mineral extraction operations are providing 20% of the raw materials needed for next-generation FTL drive production. The pharmaceutical research derived from Leviathan biological compounds has produced 3 preliminary treatments for conditions affecting Velarath, Merindian, and human physiology. She paused. The Leviathan Abyssicus primordius population of Aqualis Prime is stable, protected by a legal framework co-authored by the colony's 8 founding species, and generating approximately 4 billion standard credits annually in sustainable harvest and research revenue. She let that number sit in the air for a moment. The creatures still hunt. They are still apex predators of their ocean. They are not domesticated, we want to be very clear about this. They are wild, they are dangerous, and the behavioral management system requires constant maintenance and expertise. But they are no longer a barrier to civilization. They have become part of civilization. Their existence generates value. And things that generate value get protected. A Zorathian representative in the third row raised a communication flag. Dr. Vasquez. The human proposal described this process as culinary domestication. The phrase caused considerable concern at the time. Looking back, was that an accurate description? Vasquez considered this. Partially. The culinary element, establishing the economic value of the harvest product, was essential to the sustainability model. Without it, the management framework doesn't have a funding mechanism. But domestication was the wrong word. We didn't tame them. We found a way to exist alongside them by understanding what they valued, their territory, their patrol patterns, their behavioral triggers, and working with those natural behaviors rather than against them. She paused. Humans made this mistake for a long time. We fought nature. We lost repeatedly in expensive and tragic ways. Eventually we learned that working with natural systems rather than against them produces better outcomes for everyone, including the humans. The Merindian High Representative, an ancient being who had been on the council for over 200 years, spoke next. The methodology documentation your team submitted to the council archive has generated significant interest. 3 member civilizations have already identified candidate worlds where similar approaches might apply. The council is considering establishing a formal advisory program. Pause. Dr. Vasquez, is humanity prepared to share this methodology openly? Vasquez didn't hesitate. That's why we're here, she said. The vote to establish the Human Ecological Integration Advisory Program passed with 643 votes in favor. It was the most lopsided vote the council had taken in 30 years. Even the Velarath delegates, historically among the most conservative voices in the chamber, voted unanimously in support. After the session, Commander Zethra found Vasquez in the corridor outside the hall. You were right, Zethra said. About which part? All of it. Zethra's mandibles moved in the complex pattern that indicated genuine respect. I have spent 3 centuries in service to this council. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have seen technologies that reshaped the galaxy and species that seemed invincible proven otherwise. She paused. I have never seen anything like what your people did on Aqualis Prime. Vasquez smiled. We just did what humans do. We found something dangerous and figured out how to turn it into dinner. That is a remarkable thing to be, Zethra said, and meant it. The galaxy had spent 40,000 years afraid of the water. It had taken humanity 4 years to teach the galaxy to sit down at the table. And what a table it was.